Hi, this is David Boles, Human Meme. Today we'll discuss crumbling in a pyramid of lies. Is truth-telling so hard to do? I know people don't like it when truth is spoken to power, but what about lying in the regular days to the rest of us? Is it more convenient to build lie upon lie instead of just telling the plain truth once? As Judge Judy says on television, if you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. Lying takes a lot of energy to track and keep spinning in the air. There are serial liars, those who tell parallel, brittle untruths that appear and die. And then there are pyramid liars who have no shame and build, block upon block, a series of sustainable, concentric lies that shapeshift all truth in the near vicinity. You can only think clearly when you are out of the bounds of their influence. Our politicians appear to no longer care about the differences between facts and fictions and lies. They all blend together into one big mash of a mush that means nothing and leads nothing. Journalists used to fact-check politicians and call them out on their lies. They no longer do that because popularity has replaced veracity. And what's lost in that staking is the moral core of this nation. Excuses and fabrication are now the building blocks of a new morality that guides us down into a tumbling Jericho, and not the heights of the heavens lilting above us among the stars. We have only ourselves to blame. We no longer demand the truth from our leaders because it hurts too much, and we already know what's happening even if we're in denial and refuse to acknowledge the suffering around us. The convenient lie will always win out over the untroubled truth. We choose to comfort over the worn and weary path, for it is easier to sit and complain than to stand up, not be moved, and act beyond our own selfish interests. Here's a personal example, and you may be hearing it going on above me with the thumpity thump 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 during this podcast. I live below horrible neighbors. I've written about them in the past, bolesblogs.com, and I wrote a book called Noisy Neighbors. You can read more about that book and the extended experience online at bolesbooks.com. Now, these people who live above me vacuum for hours every day, which means they have to move every stick of furniture from one room to another because they have allergies. Their OCD is now my OCD, and it's enough to drive you into the depths. They also have a dog that barks a lot. And that dog runs across their floor as they play catch with the dog inside their apartment, as they toss a soccer ball from the bedroom to the living room. It's a shotgun apartment, so there's a long straight line of a hallway between the bedroom and the living room, and a 75-pound dog running back and forth across a wooden floor, forth and back, for hours at a time. It makes it miserable to live beneath them. Plus, the building has a no dogs policy written into every lease. We all know this. We all appreciate this. But that particular neighbor doesn't think that policy or his lease applies to him because his dog, he has decided, is a service dog. And it's a service dog because he is emotionally distressed because his day job is taking care of special needs children. Yes, he told me that with a straight face. When I discovered after months and months of wondering what that sound was, back and forth, thumpity, think, thank, thump, that it was a dog, I asked the guy if the landlord knew he had a dog living in his apartment. And he told me, sure, no problem. Lie number one. Then I told him that if he continued to lie to me, I would not help him by ignoring the dog as long as the dog was sort of kept quiet. And he said he'd never lied to me in the first place. Lie number two. I then asked him if the landlord had left a note on his door previously about getting rid of the dog. Never. Lie number three. Never? I asked him. Right. Never. Lie number, we'll say 3A. Now, what he didn't know was that the landlord had recently knocked on my door asking to borrow pen and paper to leave the guy a note about his dog. I gave him a sticky notepad and watched the landlord write a note and stick the no dogs note on the front door of the guy's apartment. I thanked the guy and left. There was no need to continue the conversation with him because he had always lied to me about the dog, and he continued to lie to me and the landlord about the dog. He followed me down the stairs and told me how lucky I was that he was being so nice to me about the dog. What? He repeated. Most people would have told me to F off about the dog, but he didn't, because he's such a nice guy, and I should thank him. I smiled and kept walking. He's a millennial, a perfect living example. Nothing applies to him. He makes his own rules. I should be thanking him for having an illegal dog in the building, right? It was my fault he had the dog, not his fault, right? He's just babysitting this random dog 1 day a week, even though the dog is there every single day. As I continued to descend the steps, he asked me if I wanted to come back up to his apartment and play with the dog and have a beer. I politely declined the invitation. Twice a day from then on, he would knock on my door, asking what he needed to do to keep the dog. I told him I had nothing to do with the dog. I didn't bring the dog into the building, and the problem wasn't mine. He told me he pays the super every month, extra money, under the table, so he can have the dog in the apartment. He called it a parking fee. Now that I believed. Finally, he wasn't lying. I also thought to myself, he was paying off the wrong guy. So I'm stuck with this complete pyramid liar who cannot be trusted. He's a perfect salesman, pretty face, depthless personality. He's an empty shell, a vessel of what a real human being is expected to be, in the minimum requirement of living a life of embrace and understanding. Think of him as a cartoon character drawn in invisible ink. Then you're on him. Now, I know this dog is staying. It's too hard to catch the guy with the dog because he just doesn't answer the door when the dog is acting up. And when he's asked about the dog, he says, "Oh, the dog is gone. The dog doesn't live here anymore." But the dog is not gone. The dog is right up there, running, thumping throughout the day, and nobody cares about the rules or the consideration of neighbors, because today, with the rise of the Millennials, everything goes. Nothing is out of bounds, and the rest of the aging of us just sit there and wonder how these Millennials know enough to take their next breath. They are fooling no one with their foolishness. Life is short, and to keep your pleasures aplenty, there comes a time to fight, and there comes a time to accept the loss of a culture and couthness, and we must find ways to live apart from those who live in their own little circles, insulated caucuses from the rest of us, and contaminating the rest of us with their vile view of the world as their own personal dog run, built slowly for their pyramiding pleasure and escape. I thank you for listening. Be a human meme.